Great stuff today. I'll be speaking with musician and film composer DC MCAULIFFE about his career and his process. Most of the music on this podcast, including the opening theme, was composed by this guest. DC is a very busy film composer, and I've been lucky enough to have collaborated with him on several projects. So if you like music and film scores, you've come to the right place. So let's give it a listen, shall we? I've always wanted to ask you this. When did you start getting into music? I mean, how old were you when this became something that you really wanted to do?
I would say it was shortly after birth. Just entering the McAuliffe household was full of movie scores all the time. There was just movie scores everywhere. So
no kidding, you're born into it. Just born into it.
I absolutely was.
I was always also curious, how many instruments do you actually play? We're going to talk about your film scoring work, but were you interested in being in a band? Is that how it worked out?
Yeah, well, I started out playing the clarinet in grade school, and then all of a sudden, after I heard Rush on the radio, that clarinet suddenly became an amplifier and a bass guitar. I actually got a pretty good price for that clarinet, but yes, started on bass guitars and then went right to piano, and then started singing everywhere. I play a little bit of a guitar, not too much, but yeah, piano is the number one.
Film composers, is it essential that piano, is that an essential instrument that you think a film composer needs to learn?
Golly gosh. I think the number one instrument any musician needs to be is a drummer first, because timing is everything.
Really?
If you don't have a sense of rhythm, everything else just kind of is a grind. I think that you'll find people who might disagree, but that is just having a sense of rhythm. I was beating on things as well from the get-go. So finding a sense of rhythm, I think, is definitely key.
There's been a couple times in my life when I have just decided to learn an instrument because it's just one of those things I've always wanted to do, but just never had the time to do it. So there's been a couple times when I did try drums, a couple times when I had different drum kits, and I just gave up immediately. Why is that? Why did I just give up so
Probably
easily?
Because when you first tried, everybody around you said, "Stop it!" Because it's just so damn loud.
Okay, well that is true. That did happen. Yeah. But for some reason, I guess for me it's hard for me to do something like that on my own. I think I would actually need like lessons to show me the proper technique, because whatever it is, I just didn't have it.
Right. I think everybody, of course, is going to be different. Having a teacher is great, and then you also need the support from the people around you, because a lot of times, I just kind of just jumped on the piano and started playing everything I could. So I never had any kind of lessons on the piano. I did know read music when I was playing the clarinet, but that's since all gone out the window.
Is reading music the same for across the board for all instruments?
Not particularly. Different instruments have different ranges in their pitch. So the way that it's written in music tablature needs to change for certain instruments. So that gets a little squishy. So yes, it's not across the board. It does differ a bit.
So I never learned to read music. They tried. I picked up the saxophone when I was in grade school, and just did not have what it takes to sit and learn. I just wasn't. I didn't have that kind of brain. It was confusing when I looked at the saxophone and like, how do you play this thing? It seems very complicated to somebody who is doesn't understand it.
Right.
And I assume it's the same with all those brass instruments. I just don't understand any of them. Maybe the trombone.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with those brass instruments, and the clarinet was kind of similar, where you can have your fingers on certain areas and they'll sound one way. You can have your fingers on the same area, but you press one other key and it makes everything a different pitch. So it is kind of creepy. And I think the whole ambidextrous thing is a major key in it too. Is like knowing that, both of your hands are doing kind of different things at once. And then there's, people who can sing and play at the same time and do stuff with their feet. Like I see an organ player that can play with his hands, and he's also doing stuff with his feet. And it's just, I think folks like that are definitely wired a certain way with it, where they can route the information just so.
I can't argue with you, because that's the same thing I ran into when I was attempting to pick up the drums. I could not get my left arm to work the way I wanted it to. It just wouldn't do it. Right hand, it pretty much do what I wanted to do with it. Left hand, hopeless.
Right.
And so I'm kind of I'm the same thing. I think that there is certain people who might just actually have natural gifts toward this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think the same would go for sports or me with math. Just adding basic numbers, it makes me cry. I just burst into tears when I try to do math.
Yeah, we're on the same page there for sure. Yeah.
To me, I think people who are good at math are good at that third eye visualization of being able to almost like they see the chalkboard, in their head, and they're able to do that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like that with music too, because when I'm playing an instrument, a lot of times I'm thinking like 2 or 3 notes ahead in my brain, but my fingers are playing 2 or 3 notes back, and that helps me. Like I'm able to visualize it in my head when I'm playing. And so I'm actually kind of reading music inside my head. And I think that's the way that people who are really good with math are like that as well.
Yeah,
or sport.
Could be. The reason I asked you earlier about the keyboard is because I've watched a few documentaries about film composing, and the technology that you can hook into a keyboard is just astounding. You can basically make anything sound like anything if you have a keyboard.
And yes, and that's a blessing and a curse for a composer, because besides making a keyboard sound like anything, you can also buy software where you play one key and it sounds like 10 people playing at once. And so that's kind of a scary thing for a composer that people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s didn't have to deal with. But yes, it is pretty amazing that with a keyboard, a lot of the sounds you're hearing are actual instruments. They're just little recordings of that instrument. People go to great lengths of recording, each string of a violin, and then the harder you press a key, it actually triggers a sound that, like the bow is going really fast around a violin, or it's going very slow and softly. So it's really, really complex the way that the software is. But yeah, that again, blessing and a curse for a lot of things.
Yeah, it's technology is kind of a double-edged sword,
right?
In the arts, for sure.
Because the whole AI thing, it's such a buzzword right now, and I can understand why actors are so upset about having their image being used, because musicians have had to deal with basically the same thing for about 20 years now, is that it's so easy for anybody to use the technology to just basically, the computer almost writes it for you sometimes. So that kind of like limits the amount of the creativity that people who just start from scratch, it's hard, because
it sounds
people
like
who can do it on the computer, it's faster.
Yeah, it's almost like you can skip steps, like I could probably write a song, on a keyboard. I could probably produce it electronically. I could probably do that. I cannot read music. I've never played an instrument. In this world, I have no real experience, but the technology is a crutch a lot of times. It can get you past those, not having the skills sometimes.
Sure. And it's kind of a conundrum, it for composers, because it's so easy to go out and just get computer generated music. A lot of directors and producers are coming from the perspective that, why should I hire a composer at all? Costs a lot more. It takes a lot more time. And really, to me, the answer to that is, if you want something completely original that is going to be, yours and yours alone on this film, then you want to hire a composer. If you're not terribly interested in how the music affects a film, then I think that that's going to be an easy answer for a lot of people. Because you can go into these music library sites and just download pre-recorded music. But of course, it's not, like 10 other people or 100 other people are using that exact same music in their film. So that's why I think that it's so much, everybody's got to make that choice. I'm not saying one is better than the other, because obviously a lot of filmmakers are not going to have a budget to hire a person to put that much work into it.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I have had some smaller films in the past where I did kind of score it with like just canned music,
Sure.
But when I have something that is important to me, like sometimes a film deserves an original score. It just does.
Yeah.
You can just tell, you've got a film on your hands. I'm like, you know what? I can't fake the score on this. I need to hire somebody to do the score.
Right.
And it's so much better when you hire someone to do an original score than when you are just kind of cutting and pasting pre-made music into the scenes.
Right.
There's a life that an original score gives to a film that you really just can't fake. Believe me, because I've tried it.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to that with those music libraries. People who are, like, I can write a piece of music and basically sell it to a company that will license it to other people. You're going to get just a very, very small fee for this company to use your music, and then they're going to be making the lion's share of the money from the people who are going to license it from them. So, and they can make tons and tons of money over using that music however many times they want to. So that, it starts getting kind of ugly there, that the more you're dealing with this canned music, the less the composers themselves are, there's just no way to like sustain a living like there was in the 70s and,
Sure.
and the 80s.
Yeah, and again, technology turns everything on its head. And if we're talking just the film industry itself, there's not an area of it that technology hasn't touched and
Right.
changed,
Mhm.
and we knew, we just did go through the strikes with the writers and the actors again, and they have new concerns, and they usually have. Sometimes they just strike because the contract's up and it's time to strike.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
time there seemed to be a little bit more concern.
Right.
So-
Yeah, because it's really out of control. If because you're going to find these actors out of work with all that, and it's definitely the same thing with music. So yeah, it's as great as the technology is, it really has its blowback in a negative way.
Right. Yeah, and you can see that particularly when you're watching some films, and some just low budget films that maybe you people have made in your circle, and you're watching it and you're like, oh man, I've heard this music before. I've
Yeah.
used this music before. That's so I totally get that.
Yeah.
As far as like composing, now you and I have worked together on several things in the past.
Mhm.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I really enjoy the collaboration that you and I have.
Yeah.
When you see a film, like if I give you a film, like, this is the cut of the film that's picture locked, what's your thoughts? So when you sit down and watch someone's film and you've been hired to score it, what's your approach? I mean, what are you looking for? Are you looking just about how the film feels visually? I mean, what's your
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. Well, everybody, of course, everybody's very different. A lot of people will already have a temp score on the film, and of course, that's just having a whole bunch of different already used music that you can't legally use in your finished film. But to a director, going to a composer, that's their way of saying, this is what I'm looking for, this type of sound. So that's kind of where I would start there, is to see how far the director and producers have gone to say, this is the style I'm looking for. Here's an example of what I'm looking for. But sometimes you don't have that. So that's where you first start, is to make sure, like, are you looking for an orchestral score? Or is it you want like synthesizers? And so that's definitely the first bit. And then of course, getting a version of the movie with no score on it. I always ask for, give me a version with a temp score, and then give me another version that doesn't have the score, because obviously I can't put my music over something with a temp score.
Well, I certainly have done the temp score thing before, not for an entire film, but key moments,
Yeah.
key moments where it's clear to me that this music represents the style and the tone that I envision for this part.
Right.
And so I don't have to temp score a whole movie. I can just drop it in those key moments, and that carries it through,
And I think that for me as a composer, that's a little bit more liberating, because when you do get a movie where the entire film has been temp scored, a lot of times you run into the conundrum where directors and producers have essentially fallen in love with their temp score.
Yes.
It's to the point where they've heard it so much, they've edited their movie to the temp score, so it's become ingrained in there, so that anytime it sometimes feels like anything that you do as a composer is not going to be good enough, or just won't feel right to them, and you start getting start getting feedback from directors and producers saying, I really like what we had in the temp score. It's like, you just, okay, so you want me to just imitate something.
Just copy it. Just copy the temp score.
And it's amazing how much that comes into play.
Sometimes film directors, they just don't trust everybody as much as they should, you know?
Sure.
Like, and they maybe, you know, because I know that I can trust the composers that I work with. I don't have to do a temp score. I know what they're going to bring to it, and plus, I want to be surprised. You know,
yeah, sure.
I want to be surprised with what they come up with. You know,
Right.
so you know, and you know, I know that in the past, you and I, we've worked on certain things. I've just had you listen to a certain soundtrack for a certain movie, and I don't put it on the film or anything. I'm like, oh, this is kind of the style that I'm, you know, that I'm thinking of, and I think I've done that a few times.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's the best case scenario when you have a temp score is to have a director or producer who is willing to be open to new ideas. That's always really nice when you get to that point, because you actually feel like you're going to get to the point one day where you have your Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, you know, or Hans Zimmer and the rest of the world,
Sure.
Type of relationships.
Right.
Because that's where things really, really click.
Right.
You know, or John Williams.
You know, with the
Star
good.
Wars.
It's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that's a course where every composer wants to be, is where they've got that freedom and the trust, you know. So
yeah. and the work, quite frankly, you know, the consistent work, you know.
Yeah.
So I imagine
Right.
it's kind of fun for a composer to be on a TV show. You know, I'm kind of a fan of Bear McCreary, you know, and I have been since he was scoring that reboot of Battlestar Galactica in the early 2000s, which I thought was fantastic. You know, and then he went on to do Walking Dead.
Right.
And I assume that it's good. It's just like an actor when they get a gig on a series, you know, oh, good. At least I've got a gig for this year, you know? And so it must be nice for a composer to be able to just kind of have his normal themes, but just tailor it all the time. Yeah. You know, this must be a really satisfying, you know, experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you know, after you feel like you've got a good working feel for what a director or producer wants, I'll usually start working on each scene kind of piecemeal. I think that's different than a lot of other composers will come up with themes and just like full pieces of music, and then when there's lots of money flowing around, you have a composer who comes up with just the music itself, and another person takes that music, turns it into notation, into music notation for an orchestra. They record it, and then somebody completely different takes that final music and kind of chops it up to the movie. And being where I am, I'm kind of all those people.
Sure.
So right now I prefer to compose the music to the movie and do each scene at a time. And it'd be fantastic to get to that point where somebody else is kind of like taking all your music and then they fit it to the film. But
right.
Yeah, right now it's like having all those hats at once, but it works out pretty good. I've found it's just a matter of being consistent. You can easily start writing tons and tons of different music, and there's no standard theme throughout the thing. So I've tried to be very cognizant of having like each character having a theme or a certain situation having its own theme, and then carrying it through that way.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's just kind of common sense, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of cements the feeling of the audience to a certain scene or a certain character. You know, it makes sense to do it that way.
Right. It would be like having way too many actors in a movie. You know, it's because like your brain has to process all these people and what their relationship is to one another. And it's the same thing with music. If you're being bombarded with all these different types of music themes, nothing kind of glues it together.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be a consistency. That's why a lot of times when you watch a movie, they'll have their primary theme, And then the movie basically is just, different versions of that theme.
Right.
I'm thinking of something like T2 or something, Terminator 2, where they have the Terminator theme, but then they will play it. You'll revisit it all through the film with different orchestrations, different. So it seems like that's like a really solid tool for a composer is to get that theme right.
Yes, I totally agree.
So how long would you prefer to compose for a film, and how long do you actually get?
Typically I would hope for, like, if it's a full feature movie, it all depends on kind of going back to that trust with the director and producer. Like, I recently did a film where it was pretty commonplace to do about 7 different versions of each scene. So it depends on the pickiness of the people who are listening to it. But if it's somebody that that they're like you're already in sync, I think like a fairly good time frame is like 8 to 10 weeks.
Okay.
When you're wearing all those different hats and you're writing the music, you're recording the music, you're putting the finishing touches on the recording itself, and then submitting it electronically. You're doing a lot of like non-music working stuff, so
sure.
it does take a long time.
Yeah.
Of course, as a composer, and probably editors have this same, like editors, special effects teams, that kind of stuff. It's all post-production, and by that time, producers, directors are like, let's wrap this up. We got through with our stuff a year and a half ago. So they're hoping to get it done as quickly as possible.
Right.
And I totally understand that. It's just, do you want things done right, or do you want them fast?
Right.
Again, it's how much everybody trusts each other to get it done right the first time.
Right.
So that you're not just coming out with a sloppy end product.
So you say you've been asked to do up to 7 versions of music for a scene before?
Oh, yes.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I think that, does that just come into play because maybe the director or whoever's overseeing the music, maybe they just don't know what they want? I mean, could there be a little bit of that?
It could very well be. But as an independent contractor, you're given the job to do. There's no easy way to come back and ask that question.
Yeah.
Because you're basically asking them, like, you're just kind of stuck at, your wheels are spinning, and you're like, I hear this, but now I want to hear this. Oh, wait, no, now I want to hear that.
Right. Yeah.
So,
they just want something to hit them hard. And then they're like, oh, that's it for sure.
Yes.
They're just waiting for that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like a lot of times in my own head, I think I'll listen to a new album by my favorite band. And the first time I hear it, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I like this. And then 2 weeks later, after 400 plays, I'm like, this is the best thing they've ever done.
No, I get that. I get that.
So you want to go back and say, try not to do these knee-jerk reactions and just say, because again, it could come in with the temp score problem, like sit and listen to it, a number of times, and then give it, a few hours and come back to it and get more comfortable with what you've been given.
Right.
And I think then, you may still think that it's not right, and that's absolutely fine, but at least give it a chance.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, sometimes, music just does have to grow on you.
Right.
It just does. I mean, I love when a song or a piece of music hits me right away and I'm like in love with it immediately, but that doesn't always happen,
Right.
and maybe sometimes the composer might know a little better what might work for the scene than say a director who isn't quite sure.
Yeah, but again, it's very difficult to try and convey that to a director because let's face it, we're all creatives. Egos are bruised very easily. Everybody's got their own level, and a lot of it has to do with experience too. It's just when I first started doing this, I didn't have the thick skin. So the first time something was rejected, I was just like, well, screw you. But
we've all been there. Yeah.
Right. And something that you actually love is like, and you think to yourself, man, this fits so perfectly. And when you're told that it doesn't, again, as a composer, as somebody who's hired to do a job, you are working for the director. That is still an inescapable fact. It's not my movie.
Right.
To me, that's the way that I think about it now.
I gotta say, the music is such an important part of this process. Now, I obviously wanted to talk to you specifically about film scoring, but I know that you probably, I think you have a band, don't you?
At the moment, I am between bands.
You're between bands?
I am, and actually, I've got a couple of projects at my sleeve that are going to come to fruition within the year. On that front, so it's definitely I'm still doing because I definitely have a love of live performing music. I like to make an ass out of myself in public a lot.
Yeah,
and
it's a well-known fact. It's a well-known fact.
But at the same rate, I really love doing the stuff on the film score front as well.
That's great, man. That's great.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, DC, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I just love collaborating with you, and I think you're one of the best working in, at least as far as I know.
Well, thank you so very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, man. And I hope you have a great day.
All right, John. Thank you. You too.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks again to my friend, DC, for being sober this morning for this interview. That's a joke. He's sober most mornings. Until around noon, anyway. Check out his website, the link for which is in the show notes.